Hey, this is Raul for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we're going to take another step at taking what I believe is a really nice bass and making it even better. So for those of you that have been following, this is my 70s something Fernandes. It's kind of a knockoff Fender, and I got it because somebody at work was moving away and they were selling their stuff, and I lucked out and I got this bass. The basic bones for this instrument were good, but I've been on a journey to make it better, or to make it how I want it to be. So the first thing I did, of course, is I took out the original electronics and replaced the pickups with Rio Grande pickups. So we've got those. The next step, changed the bridge. Went with a high density bridge, KSM foundation bridge on this, which has given me a lot better sustain and a lot better sound characteristics than the original kind of so-so bridge. And now I'm looking at the tuners. Now, we had the opportunity to chat with the fine people from Graphtech Guitar Labs at the last NAMM show, and they were talking to us about the Ratio tuner machine head assemblies. The concept behind this is that I had noticed when I was tuning, especially with the Rode tuner, I was getting kind of an error message with one of the strings. And it doesn't do that with any of my other basses, but it was doing it with this one. So when I talked to the people at Rode, they said, well, you might have a kind of a problem tuner. These tuners are almost 50 years old. I'm not exactly sure how old they are. They're in good shape when you consider that. But if I can make this even better, why not? So I'm going to replace the original tuners for a set of the Ratio tuners from Graphtech Guitar Labs. And I'm going to take you along with me on this journey. There's some things I know they're going to be different, but I've planned carefully, and I will share all of the details with you as we go. Okay, let's take a close look at the Graphtech Ratio Machine Heads. To start out with, you always want to plan your project, so you want to look at the bass that you have, and you want to decide what kind of tuning machines do you want to replace it. In my instance, I have a Fender type bass, and it's kind of vintage, so I want to stay with kind of the same feel. And so this is a traditional open back style Fender Clover kind of tuner. You can print out a template so you can get an idea how things will fit, and that is what I did. Measurements are great, but I actually cut it out so I could put it over my existing tuners to kind of get an idea where my holes will be, if I can use the same holes, the backing plates, if the size is going to be an issue. Planning ahead is going to save you problems in the long run, or have you be ready to know what to expect when you get into it. The next thing we look at, what's inside the package. I'm doing a 4-string. So I've got 4 tuners. Each one of them has a unique gear ratio. There are the bushings that go on the, I'm going to call it the public side of the headstock, and of course appropriate screws to hold all of these together. The gear ratios, coming back, because this is a 4-string, it's E, A, D, G, with the gear ratio being 48:1 for E, 36:1 for the A, 25:1 for the D, and 23:1 for the G string. So when you compare with those two different gauges at the extremes, from the E to the G, E is almost, well, it's around double the gear ratio. And all of that is designed to help have fast and precise tuning ability, even though these strings are at a different gauge, which is something that you're not used to conventionally. If you look to these old tuners, all of the gear ratios are exactly the same. So we should hope to, when they're installed, do one turn and be able to get the tuning change that we're looking for. Let's talk about a few extra considerations I found along the way. Things to consider if you're going to install a new set of tuners. Number one is the age of the headstock and the neck. This wood is really, really hard, which is what you want. However, it also can get dry and can get a little bit brittle. And that is going to give you some working challenges. As simple as it is, where you're looking at the tuner machine part, the bushing portion that faces the public, faces the outside, and screws, you've got 16 screws, it can be a lot harder than it looks. And so just be patient and work it gradually. Things that will come in handy to do this process, you want a dowel that is about the diameter of the hole where the tuner goes through. To on one side, if it's tapered, you can use it to help loosen the old bushing that's on the front of the bass. Once you've got that a little loose, you can use it to help tap it out from the other end. In my instance, because we're on coronavirus lockdown, I happen to spy the perfect stick, and you'll see that here as my tool. So you don't have to get anything majorly fancy. That helps. Because these facings, these bushings are swedged in, you want to make sure you kind of lubricate your new ones to get it in. I used soap, which is just, it's easy enough. Rub some plain soap on the outside of it. And you're going to use a C-clamp to compress those in. I put a board underneath it to help minimize damage to the backside of the headstock. The challenge I ran into putting in the new ones is that because they fit in tight, it generated a partial crack that you can kind of see here. I'm not too worried. It doesn't go all the way through, but it's something you should have in mind if you're working with older wood, that you can run into some challenges there. The next part, because of the disparity of the holes, I wanted to just not have a bunch of holes on the back of the headstock, so I filled those in using natural colored toothpick and wood glue and end cutting snips to trim off the bulk. And then I worked with a little Dremel and a diamond edge to make those flush. If I were really worried about how this was going to look, I would probably sand the whole back of it and then reapply a coat of varnish or something nice like that, some spray. But I'm not overly worried about it, and it's the part that nobody sees. I just didn't care much for seeing a bunch of holes. I did not have to fill these in order to have a better place for the new screw holes. The new screw holes were in totally different spots. Another part that you want to be careful about is when you are piloting the holes for your new screws, you want to make sure that you go deep enough, but you don't go all the way through to the outside, the facial part of the headstock. One way to do that is to make a visual stop, and I used a piece of synthetic wine cork as kind of my stopper, put the drill bit through it, and use that so when I was getting close, I knew that I was not wanting to go through. Now, it is important that you go deep enough, because again, the wood is hard, and when those screws, if you have not gone quite deep enough, those screws will hit the bottom of your pilot hole and they will not go any further. So I learned this by getting them almost all there, because I was a little overly cautious with my pilot holes. I had to take it all apart and re-tap those holes to make it so that the screws would go all the way in. But now that they're in, everything is down nice and flush and feels nice and strong. I will also mention that I think with these plates being in with the screws, that is also going to prevent that crack that we can see very slightly from the other side. It'll kind of buttress it together and hold it, but I'll keep an eye on it, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. Let's see how it works with tuning. Okay, let's see how it wants to tune up here. Okay, there you have it. Real easy, nice and smooth. Okay, so let's kind of sum things up. Before I do tell you about the rest of the details, let me mention that I took advantage of this moment to put on a new set of strings. I went with DR Legend flat wounds, in case you recognize them when you look at them. For this bass, flat wounds are what feels best. I've tried some round wounds and haven't loved it all that much. I'm always going back to the flat wounds. So that's what you're seeing when I'm doing this. As you could tell, the process is not difficult. You just want to pay attention to detail. If you don't feel comfortable drilling on your instrument or doing some of those things, it's an easy thing that you could take to your local shop, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to install a set of these Ratio machine tuners for you. When we did the tuning test with the Rode tuner, no longer any malfunction or error things. When I tune them manually using the clip-on, the tuning is so smooth and so easy and so precise. It goes right where you want it, and it's staying there nicely. So I'm really thrilled. I think I have made this instrument a lot better than it was when it started out. Now, it's a little beaten up, and you've seen that if I wanted it to be more perfect, that might be something your shop would do as well, like covering the holes and lacquering and varnishing the back and some of those details. I would, in retrospect, really consider these to be great on a newer bass, in that you know that the wood will not be brittle when you go to put in those bushings. But it's working great, and I don't think I'm going to have any problems, but it was probably the only detail that I ran into. So if you want to know more about the Ratio machine tuners for your bass, simply go to graphtech.com and you can get all of the rest of the information. And if you have questions, contact them and they can help walk you through the process as well. So this has been Raul for Bass Musician Magazine. We have just installed a new set of tuners on my Fernandes 70-something. They're Graphtech Ratio machine tuners, coming to you on Bass Musician Magazine.